everybody. Today we are going to be taking some notes and just doing a really short introduction to lead. So lead is a element, which means it is a pure substance. We can find it on the periodic table. We've been learning all about what that means. Now, its location on the table tells us a little bit about it. So if we go ahead and draw a periodic table, and we're going to draw the full table. So we're going to draw the bottom two rows as well. This periodic table can be split up into three different categories. Now, there's a lot of ways to sort and organize this table. We'll learn about a lot of different ones as we talk through the unit. But for today, we're just going to talk about the three main categories. And those categories are metal, metalloid, and non-metal. And I have these open circles here because we are going to color code these categories on our table over here to the left. Now, all of the elements that we have identified and are stable enough to look at can be classified as one of these three categories. All of the metals on the periodic table are found to the left of this crude diagonal that I'm going to draw in. So this diagonal on a real periodic table starts at boron and would run down to element 118. Anything to the left of this diagonal is going to be a metal. Use a highlighter or a colored pencil, and we're going to color them yellow. Now, there is one exception. Hydrogen, we're going to save for later. But everything else over to the left, we're going to color yellow. Every element over here is a metal. And it has the traits that you think of when you hear the word metal. These materials tend to be fairly malleable, ductile, they're bendable, they are solid at room temperature. Many of them are your stereotypical metals, and actually include the bottom two rows that are pulled out as well. So all of these elements down here are metals. In fact, over 70% of the periodic table is classified as a metal. Now, the opposite of a metal would be a non-metal. So now I'm going to take my blue and I'm going to color those in. Metals are found on the left, non-metals are going to be found on the right of this diagonal line. And then hydrogen, which is on the left side, is also going to be classified as a non-metal. Hydrogen and helium tend to break some of our rules just because they are such small elements. And they're in that first row and they only use that first shell. So elements to the right of this diagonal are going to be classified as non-metal. And they have kind of the opposite traits of the metals. So metals think of strong, flexible, durable. Non-metals tend to be fairly brittle. Instead of shiny, they're fairly dull. And in between that, we have the metalloids. Now I'm just going to color these, not really a color, I'm just going to checker them. Metalloids are kind of metallish. So they have some traits of a metal. They also have some traits of a non-metal. Lead on the periodic table is found right about here. Its element symbol is Pb, Remember, those symbols don't always perfectly match the names for a variety of reasons, usually the reason being that the symbol comes from the Latin name. It's element number 82. Already said symbol is Pb, full name is lead, and its atomic mass is going to be 207. So, based on its location on the table, we can already identify a few things about lead. First thing we know is lead is definitely a metal. And this is a fairly large atomic mass. So lead is classified further as a heavy metal. Now, we're choosing to look at lead because lead has a lot of very unique traits that made it very useful historically. So the first trait is lead is very, very dense. And you guys have done a lab on this and kind of understand what that term means, which means we have a lot of particles per unit volume. If you picked it up, it would likely feel very, very heavy. Now, the properties that made it very popular historically, lead is also very corrosion. Corrosion being a word similar to rust, resistant. To be corrosion or to be rust resistance means it is very unlikely to rust, oxidize, or corrode, which means that metal is going to stay nice for a longer period of time. Lead is also fairly flexible for a metal. Which made it a popular building material for making different things because that metal will bend or dent even, not break. There's a lot of other traits or properties about lead, and actually I want you to know that those words are interchangeable, traits and properties. But these are some of the big ones that made it really popular as an industrial material. So, last thing we're going to do is we're just going to briefly cover what were some of those industrial uses for lead. So, a few of them are more obvious than others. So, I talked a little bit about the flexibility and the bendability of lead. That made it a really popular material for plumbing pipes. And these would be commercial and residential. So, plumbing pipes would be the pipes going into your home and the pipes that are kind of running around town. So it's hooking up to things like sinks, baths, kitchens, all of those things that many of us would have in our home. So this is me drawing up a sink. So here's our first use of lead. Lead is used commonly in plumbing pipes. Lead is also used in some more cosmetic things. So lead was used partially for its dark color in different cosmetics, such as mascara. So this will be my mascara one. So used in different cosmetics. And then some other uses around the house would also be paint. Lead particles were added to a lot of paint products. It gave them very bright colors, and those colors tended to stick around longer. So it was used in a lot of different household paints. So I'm going to draw an industrial paintbrush. And it would paint a lot of different things. So it would be used on houses, it would also be used on toys, but lead was added to a lot of paints because it made those colors very vibrant. And then the last use that I'm just going to highlight quickly, lead was also used in gasoline. So this is me doing my best gas pump. So you guys might notice, many of you are drivers, when you go to the pumps, you often select unleaded gasoline. So the reason the gasoline says unleaded is because historically that gasoline used to be leaded, which means lead was an additive to the gasoline and it improved engine performance. Now, the problem with this, what goes in must come out. That rule applies to many things, including cars. When you put that leaded gasoline into cars and it's processed by the engine, well, after it's processed, it's spit back out, which means not only is that lead going into the car in a liquid form, it's coming out of the car in a gas form for the exhaust. So lead was also indirectly added to the air of our environment because it was pumped through the cars and came out in the form of exhaust. Okay, so that's a little bit of background on lead. There's a ton of different other uses, but I just want you to have some ideas for visuals because your final project contains some requirements for drawing and making visuals. And just to give you an idea, lead was a very commonly used product, and it was used across a variety of different consumer goods. Some that you cannot see, like plumbing pipes, and some that are very obvious, like cosmetics and paints.